Hello friends, my name is JJ. So, as longtime viewers know, on this channel we like to make videos promoting cultural literacy, which is the idea that there are some things in this world that everybody should know about in order to communicate with the most people and understand the most media. You should know what the Mona Lisa is, you should know what the Glorious Revolution is, you should know who Moshe Dayan is, and so on. Now, a lot of this prescribed knowledge tends to drift towards the historical, which can make my younger viewers a little bit defensive. What about 21st century internet stuff, they cry? Isn't that relevant for cultural literacy too? And indeed, it is. Just as young people have an obligation to learn about the culturally significant things that came before them, so too do older people have an obligation to keep up with the way that people younger than them are influencing the culture today. If the goal of cultural literacy is improved communication, then that has to include the youngs being able to talk to the olds about stuff that is familiar to them. And on that note, today I thought we would talk about a realm of culture that young people have been particularly prolific in building in the internet age: creepypastas. Creepypasta is a weird term that is used to describe basically all sorts of legends and stories and pictures of scary monsters and creatures and things that originate from internet-based communities. The name itself is a kind of convoluted reference to copying and pasting content. People who did a lot of copying and pasting were known as copypastas, which then became copypastas, with creepypasta then being used to describe when the stuff that was being shared was particularly creepy. And then at some point the term just evolved into a less precise synonym for internet horror in general. It is a mostly American-led cultural phenomenon, with a lot of the most iconic creepypasta monsters and stories being created by Americans and touching on explicitly American cultural themes and tropes. As I noted in a previous video, a lot of creepypasta type stuff also embodies a lot of explicitly middle-class anxieties, reflecting the cultural milieu of its creators, although a lot of creepypasta stuff is also just very otherworldly and weird for the sake of weird. So the other day on Tumblr, I came across this batch of creepypasta sprites made by the wonderfully talented sprite artist Bugbear Stew. Since I'm a real sucker for anyone who is making some effort to create a canon of American cultural tropes, I figured I would use his art as the basis for the rest of this video. We will go through all of these 12 critters and I will explain their cultural significance one by one. This whole exercise was very much a cultural literacy education for myself. I will admit that I knew basically nothing about any of these guys going in. The creepypasta phenomenon is usually described as being a very Gen Z thing, since it mostly unfolded during the 2010s when the Zoomers were still easily excitable tweens, but my generation was stewing in our cynical late 20s. But fortunately for me, this has also made the subject incredibly easy to research, since there is nothing that Zoomers love more than making YouTube videos about creepypasta lore. One last thing before we get into it, I will just give a low-key warning that some of the creepypasta creatures can be a little unnerving at times, and some of the pictures can be a bit unsettling to those of you who are delicate about these sorts of things, which I totally understand. But that said, I'm not trying to make a creepy video of my own here, so I'll do my best to present them in a way that is not too shocking or sensationalistic. Ready? Ready. So, let's start with these two. These are perhaps two of the most famous monsters associated with the SCP, which is a popular collaborative fiction project that plays out on a specialized website. So, have you ever wondered why there aren't any monsters in our world? Why there aren't any ghosts or aliens or other magical or paranormal things running around and bothering us? You might think it's because those things don't exist, but in reality, it is because of an outfit known as the SCP Foundation. The SCP is like Men in Black meets Area 51 meets the Ministry of Magic from Harry Potter. It's basically a top secret organization set up by world leaders to covertly capture, contain, and study all of the horrible monsters and supernatural beings that inhabit our world. And man oh man, our world apparently has a lot of pretty freaky things in it. The SCP idea traces its roots to a 2007 post on the Creepy Things section of the notorious message board 4chan. A guy named Wesley Williams wrote a post about this repulsive-looking sculpture made by a Japanese artist, which he said was actually a living being named SCP-173. And he proceeded to describe SCP-173 in very formal bureaucratic language as if he was a government scientist or intelligence officer writing an official report. You know, like...
SCP-173 is animate and extremely hostile. The object cannot move while within a direct line of sight. Line of sight must not be broken at any time with SCP-173. Personnel assigned to enter its container are instructed to alert one another before blinking. Object is reported to attack by snapping the neck at the base of the skull or by strangulation.
The post was really compelling, and as a result, people started copying Wesley's formal bureaucratic style to describe monsters of their own, always keeping with the convention of naming them SCP whatever. This one is SCP-682, for instance, which is an extremely dangerous giant crocodile that is described as being impossible to kill, and has been seen moving and speaking with its body 87% destroyed or rotted. Over time, there were so many of these monster profiles written that they were migrated from 4chan over to a dedicated SCP website, which is set up as if it is the official website of a dedicated SCP organization itself. Today, the site features over 9,000 profiles, no longer just describing creepy creatures, but all sorts of creepy objects and places, and even abstract concepts as well. These two continue to serve as the most iconic SCPs of all, however. The SCP subculture is pretty hierarchical and structured as far as these sorts of things go. Because the site has the pretense of being a serious organization documenting serious paranormal phenomena, there has always been a lot of top-down administrative control and community checks and balances to prevent bad writing from being included. And this can provoke a fair bit of division and drama, given that at this point there is considerable disagreement over what an SCP should or shouldn't be. In any case, the sheer amount of entries on the site, all of which are preemptively declared public domain, has proven a great bounty for all manner of content creators who are looking for a quick and convenient source of creepy lore to make YouTube videos or podcasts about. This guy is called the Rake, and he is a popular general purpose monster. He originates from a 2006 story posted by a guy named Brian Somerville on the Something Awful forums, which is one of the longest running general purpose message boards on the internet. I remember it being popular with edgy teens back when I was in high school. Anyway, despite its popularity, the original Rake story wasn't all that creative. It describes a couple waking up to discover that there is a naked humanoid creature in their bedroom that then scurries down the hall and mauls their young daughter. Subsequent fans have declared it to be either a Native American skinwalker or a so-called sleep paralysis demon come to life. Around 2010 or so, people started using this fake photograph that someone had made for unrelated purposes to represent the Rake, and this then provided a template for an abundance of Rake-related fan art, plushies, and Halloween costumes that were to follow. This next one is Jeff the Killer, which is a character based on this grotesquely distorted Photoshop job of somebody's face. No one is really quite sure what the story behind this photo is. It was pulled from a Japanese message board in the early 2000s, and you will often hear it described as one of the great unsolved mysteries of the internet. Anyway, the photo bounced around in the 2000s as something that could be used to freak people out. And then in 2011, a guy named Joshua Jordan posted a full backstory about it on the Creepypasta wiki, which had recently been created. According to Josh, the guy in the photo was a kid named Jeff, who was once on the receiving end of a bullying so violent and severe it left him hideously disfigured. His mental state accordingly declined, and he disfigured himself even further, and then he became a serial killer who murdered his family and a bunch of other people. This Joker-esque origin story resonated with a lot of young people, who proceeded to write fan fiction and make fan art about Jeff, who over time gradually progressed into a handsome and charming anti-hero and the center of his own elaborate fictional universe, complete with a vast array of spin-off characters. And this in turn inspired the creation of other creepypasta anti-heroes like Eyeless Jack over here. In 2009, a young artist named Cache Whitman made this photo of an eyeless guy staring at you in bed. And then in 2012, a wiki called Eyeless Jack. It was short and cliched, but the kids loved it, and Eyeless Jack would go on to have all sorts of fanfic adventures of his own, often with Jeff the Killer at his side as his best friend and partner in crime, or maybe more. Jeff and Jack are good examples of the degree that, over time, a lot of creepypasta characters tend to regress in the direction of being less overtly creepy and more cool and relatable figures that are popular with preteens, including a lot of preteen girls. This is, of course, Link from The Legend of Zelda, but not quite. In The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask for the Nintendo 64, Link learns a spell where he can make a statue of himself, but it's sort of ugly and off-model. Flash forward a few years, and over the course of a few days in 2010, a guy named Alex Hall posted an elaborate story on 4chan about buying a haunted copy of Majora's Mask at a yard sale. And the game was apparently all screwed up in various ways, and he supplemented his posts with links to videos on YouTube showing everyone just how screwed up his game was. The Link statue featured prominently in a lot of these clips, and is eventually revealed to be the manifestation of Ben, the dead child who originally owned the game before he tragically drowned. Today, the phrase Ben drowned and the creepy Link statue face have become symbols of the sort of complex, multimedia, multi-platform style of creepy storytelling that is now possible in the internet age. Alex's story also helped kick off an era of haunted video game themed content that is still thriving today, much of which plays off a particular sort of fear that the familiar symbols of your youth will one day betray you. On that note, we have this version of Mickey Mouse, which is from an urban legend about a supposedly unseen Disney cartoon, usually known by the nickname Suicide Mouse or something along those lines. Apparently, it is a Mickey Mouse cartoon that is so weird and surreal and disturbing, it can drive a man to kill himself simply by watching. This one originated as a literal copypasta in the sense of being a short and cryptic text description of the alleged cartoon that was copy and pasted all over the internet for a time. Beginning in 2009, people began making fake versions of the cartoon and posting them online with claims of having finally found it. These are all generally quite poorly made and never match the complexity of the animation described in the original story. And of course, they all have endings, which cannot help but be incredibly anticlimactic, given that the whole point of the original story was that no one ever lived to tell exactly what happened at the end. So yeah, watch away. I'm sure you'll survive. Speaking of things that make you go crazy, this is the Smile Dog. In 2009, a guy named Michael Lutz wrote a creepy short story for 4chan about a JPEG of a scary dog that apparently made everyone who looked at it go insane. And of course, Michael showed us the picture of the dog at the end of the story, and it was this. There's not much more to it than that. The dog has become an incredibly popular, freaky image, and some kids have managed to work the dog into the Jeff the Killer cinematic universe. This is Momo, a very grotesque Japanese bird woman statue that went viral in 2018, both because of how hideous it was, but also because it was briefly at the center of a moral panic in Latin America. Supposedly, kids were being told that they could text with Momo, and she would text you back and either steal your personal information or persuade you to off yourself or things of that sort. Latino parents worried that their children were being harassed through their phones by some sick weirdo, and there was a lot of sensationalistic coverage of it in the press, even rumors of Momo-incited deaths. However, as the Snopes people note, There was never much hard evidence to suggest that any of this was ever actually happening, and was probably more hype or hoax than reality. Trying to freak people out with pictures of the bird statue has remained popular, however. This guy is Horace Horrible, who is a character from Candle Cove. Candle Cove is a short story written by Christopher Straub, who is a very talented guy that I know slightly. He's been making online content for literal decades across a wide variety of genres, including webcomics, music, YouTube videos, and various forms of creative fiction. He wrote Candle Cove in 2009. It's told through a series of message board posts where a bunch of Gen Xers reminisce about an obscure pirate-themed puppet show called Candle Cove from their youth. And as their posts go on, they begin to realize with their adult hindsight just how twisted and disturbing the show truly was. Horace Horrible is described as one of the bad guys, and he is described as looking more or less like this. In 2016, Chris's story was adapted into the first season of the internet horror-themed TV show Channel Zero, though obviously greatly fleshed out. Chris has also made a spin-off YouTube channel called Local 58 TV, based on the fictional television station that aired Candle Cove. I have spoken about it before. It is very well done and is often described as being one of the best examples of so-called analog horror that evokes terror through the use of old-fashioned technology. Okay, this guy is Siren Head. Everyone loves him, right? For a while, I used to have this Siren Head plushie in my backdrop as a symbol of national pride, and that is because Siren Head is Canada's contribution to the great American creepypasta canon. The creature was originally dreamed up in 2018 by Toronto artist Trevor Henderson, who specializes in creating pictures of hideous monsters photoshopped into everyday settings. This thing he made with a loudspeaker for a head proved incredibly popular, and in 2020, a filmmaker from India named Raghav Anil Kumar made an incredibly popular YouTube short film featuring the character that, as of now, has been viewed nearly 200 million times. Siren Head is particularly popular with very young kids for some reason. It's not just plushies. A lot of kids these days have like Siren Head notebooks for school or Siren Head birthday cakes and stuff like that. And with that in mind, let us close out with perhaps the most famous creepypasta goblin of them all, Slenderman. He was created by a young American artist called Eric Knudsen in 2009 as part of a fake photo contest on the good old Something Awful forums. The conceit of Eric's submission was that a weird, tall, faceless man had been unintentionally captured in a pair of old photographs, with both pictures having been taken just before something very bad happened to a bunch of children. Eric's creepy photos soon went viral, and people quickly started making all sorts of fake Slenderman pictures of their own. The character then received a significant boost of popularity in 2012, following the release of a Slenderman-themed indie horror game for the PC, which for a brief while was a popular subject of Markiplier-esque reaction videos here on YouTube. In 2018, Sony released a Slenderman movie, which did okay at the box office, but got overwhelmingly poor reviews, with one critic describing it as a tedious paint-by-numbers of horror cliches. Slenderman had already been falling out of fashion by then, however, in part because of a horrifying incident that happened in Wisconsin in the spring of 2014. On May the 31st of that year, two 12-year-old girls lured a friend of theirs into the woods and stabbed her 19 times with a kitchen knife, nearly killing her. According to them, they did it as part of a delusional effort to impress Slenderman and become his minions. This was obviously a deeply shocking and sensational story that made a lot of news, and it also marked the first time that many grown-ups were introduced to this whole world of creepypasta monsters and things that their kids were obsessing over online. The 2014 stabbing incident has thus become a deeply cautionary tale about the possible dangers that can ensue when you introduce quite sophisticated and realistic horror hoaxes to young children who might have not yet fully developed the intellectual capacity to distinguish fantasy from reality. All right, and on that grim note, Let me just close with a few additional thoughts on the importance of cultural literacy. To be knowledgeable of things is not a qualitative judgment. It's just an acknowledgement that there is some value in having a broad grasp of facts about the world that you inhabit. While some older people are snobbishly indifferent to youth culture, others go too far in the opposite direction and assume every youthful fad is infused with deep insight and significance. Often, it has to be said, in an attempt to gain youth approval and feel a bit younger themselves. Having now learned a fair bit about the creepypasta subculture, I can't say that I found it all that exciting. Some of it is creative, but a lot of it is very dopey and derivative. A lot of it also seems to reward credulity and conformity in ways that I think can be socially harmful. And to be fair, Gen Z has now largely aged out of it, and in many of the videos and things that you see about this phenomena, they will make a big show of saying that the most consequential era of internet horror is over, and rightfully so. But at this point, the cultural footprint has been made, and references and allusions to creepypasta things seem likely to live on in American culture for quite a while, even long after the juvenile subculture of creepypastas themselves have gone the way of chat roulette and fidget spinners. But I would be curious to hear your perspective on all of this. Were you ever into creepypasta stuff when you were younger? What do you think its cultural legacy has been, or will be? Would you ever want your kids getting into this kind of thing? Let me know in the comments, and let me know what canon of things you'd like to see me do next. Until then, I will see you next week.